You're the only person that can make me feel alone. Just withdraw your eyes, you'll hear me start to mourn. I've never been so lonely as when you're in the next room. I hope you come back in here soon. Let your face in my eyes, all we can, now you're gone. 24 long miles of my car is broken down. You want to travel 3 and you can't travel 10. So when will we ever see you again? And I've never been so devastated. I've never felt more betrayed. Got a spring in my eye and a light in my step. I wasn't made to feel this way. Got your hair in my hand, your legs running to me. Should I let the vibe? Should I wait till Tuesday? I'm sorry for the silence, I'm sorry for the noise. You know I'll make it up to you with a million state McCoys. And how can you like me with this head and these arms? How can this shallow freak be accused of having charm? The way the earthquakes land and I blow my nose. How long can I be myself before you get up and go? And I've never been so devastated. Never felt more betrayed. Got a spring in my eye and a light in my step. I wasn't made to feel this way.
That song was called Lonely, apparently, at least that's what I named it. It was Malcolm Middleton. Now, hello. I'm trying to arrange this in the best way so that I can still see how many people are there and if there are any comments and not see myself. It's not actually possible, really, but I'm not going to look at myself. This means I can only look at a computer screen. I mean, just stuff. Why am I not going to look at myself? Because it's very narcissistic. And although it may not be narcissistic per se to look at oneself, there are reasons to look at oneself besides narcissism. It definitely is going to inflame narcissistic tendencies to be constantly looking at oneself. And this is the reason that, well, of course, it can help to identify narcissistic tendencies too. Self-examination is the only life worth living, according to Socrates, who was a pederast, among other things. So take that advice with a pinch of salt. Like, self-examination can become morbid self-absorption, in the words of Travis Bickle, who wasn't a pederast. He was other things. And so there are definitely ways to examine oneself that help one to become less narcissistic, but at a certain point I think it becomes necessary to look away from the image we've created of ourselves rather than endlessly deconstructing it or refurbishing it. I mean, that's the thing. Am I deconstructing my identity in order to be free of it, or to refurbish it and create a smoother, better, faster, stronger $6 million identity? That's the perennial question. And regarding the very specifics of this thing with YouTube, why I think this is going to be the last YouTube. Well, basically because of this. I mean, well, there's two things, but I think they're interconnected. And some of the negative comments I've got I mean, I think a lot of them, they've come on YouTube, but I think they maybe come via YouTube as well. I think that what I've been doing on YouTube has inflamed something, and it's not just that I've been talking about Dave Oshana, but I've been talking about him on YouTube, so that sort of combination. So the environment of YouTube is a particular environment that I didn't create. I was just using for my own ends. And it's like if you set up a stall in a shopping mall, you become an extension of that corporate enterprise. And of course, the kind of clients or customers that you're going to interact with are the ones that come to the shopping mall. They don't necessarily come for you, they just come across you on the shopping mall. Now, I don't know how literally or accurate that is as a metaphor. Specifically with YouTube, it seems unlikely that many people come to me just because they're surfing on YouTube and they find me by chance, but there's still a kind of demographic that just likes to watch stuff on YouTube and is more likely to look at what I'm doing simply because it's on YouTube, and perhaps even because it's the live format, although I don't think, because there's only 8 people here now, there's only ever 20 or 30 people on any live event, I don't think the people who've been trolling me, maybe you are, they're here now, I don't think generally they've been watching me live, but there's something about the live presentation that, and I'm changing streams a bit here now, hopefully I'll bring it together, but that because it's more raw, it's less guarded, it's more of a pure offering of just me, how I am, and it's not an edited product. So I think that there's more vulnerability in that, and I think that may have encouraged some of the more aggressively inclined people to come in for the attack, even if it's after the fact, just watching a replay of me doing one of these things on YouTube. And one of the attacks has been, I've deleted all these comments because I don't feel they add anything, but of course they get to me. I mean, I notice them and I pay attention to them at least for a moment or two, and they do form part of their information as far as what I'm doing, whether it's a good idea or not. And so one of the accusations was that, well, this is all narcissistic what I'm doing, and as with all kinds of criticism, including the most negative, thoughtless and troll-like, I mean, even that kind, there's going to be a grain of truth in it, or a grain of signal in the noise. And this whole thing about doing YouTube videos or presentations being narcissistic is that grain. as in it's more narcissistic than I want it to be. So the main thing there, good morning Oswald, is I mean, the most obvious problem is, as I say, I'm just looking at myself, and I'm not now. I'm just looking now. Instead, I'm just looking at tabs on in my browser. And the alternative to that is looking at you, the listener, which I can't do on YouTube. I can do it on Zoom. And of course, if I do this on Zoom, although it will still be live, it won't be public live. And so I'll be off YouTube as well. So that would be two birds down with a single stone. First of all, the narcissism of just looking at myself and not seeing who I'm speaking to. And secondly, the problem of YouTube, of being on YouTube in an environment that I suppose does cater to narcissism, does attract narcissistic personalities. I mean, aren't we all? But it's a forum and a venue for that. And so it's natural that people would frame me in that context, and they're not entirely wrong. Of course, I have those tendencies. So, with that all said then, I will continue doing something of this sort, either on Zoom live for those who sign up, and or as a live radio stream, because what I enjoy about these things is just the riffing, and that may not happen on Zoom. If there's people there, I may feel that I want to interact more, and then something might be lost, which is the opportunity of expressing things that wouldn't be expressed because there's the free associative riffing of just being able to talk and see where it goes. And I do enjoy that, and I think that that's more naturally suited to radio. So yeah, I just looked into it very briefly before I started here. It seems pretty easy to set up a live stream radio thing, so I may do that. But for now, it's going to be Zoom, and that's only if people are interested. So that could even be today, could even be in the next 5 minutes. It doesn't seem very likely, but I can see my inbox right now. That's Jason with a U at protonmail.com. So if any of you 10 people watching or listening are interested in a Zoom event today or later, send me an email, including if you already have for previous events, to let me know that you're still interested, or perhaps specifically interested today. Okay, and in the meantime, I mean, in the near future, I'll set up something at the website where it's easy to just sign up for email alerts about future Zoom events. Although generally, I suppose if it works, they'll just be in the same time slot as these YouTube things. But people will need to sign up for them beforehand and answer a few questions and agree to the terms and conditions, which is mainly about substance use. All right, so as long as we are here, before I made a list of things I want to talk about today so that everyone else could see them, but also so it'd be easy for me to reference. So I do have a theme I'd like to explore today, which relates to the last blog post. If you haven't read it, you're behind, you won't be up to speed, but I'm sure you won't get lost. And it has to do with coming out of the closet, change of heart, change of focus, and how that's proceeding, because I think you'll be interested. Just got an email, Radio Narcissus, from Martin. Nice instant response. What was I saying? Amazing how easily distracted I get by good news. yeah, just about the themes today that I will get to. But I think I want to start with the title theme, which is where the body is. I'm not sure about the lightning striking. I'm not sure if I'll get to that. But that's in the latest blog post, why I refer to lightning striking. The reason I want to mention where the body is because it occurred to me recently that infinitely more important or essential than me finding things to talk about on an event such as this, I've got a weird speech defect that seems to be emerging here, is how I'm experiencing my body as I'm speaking. It should also be how you are experiencing my body. Obviously, you're listening to the words and they're coming from my body, so you're experiencing my body by listening to my words. And you're going to experience my body and the words that it's creating, the sounds, exactly in the context or in ratio to or equivalent to how I'm experiencing my body. You may not be consciously aware of it, but you will. Your body is receiving information from my body exactly as it comes, body to body. There's no filter there. There is a filter, but I mean that the filter doesn't prevent my body communicating with your body. It just prevents you being aware of what's happening in your body that is telling you what's happening in my body. So what occurred to me recently, I was going to ask Mike B about this. He won't be listening because he works on a Saturday, but he'll listen to the replay. He might even edit the good bits out and put it on the Showreel YouTube channel that he's created for me. I was thinking about asking Mike B to re-edit one of these talks with annotations, with a little sort of cartoon words and arrows and stuff. I would of course have to tell him how to annotate, but what's happening in my body as I'm speaking and how that lets me know either at the time or when I look back and watch myself in non-narcissistic fashion, self-examining, to see when my ego, my false self, and my mind they're not all synonymous, but aspects of the same thing I'm trying to talk about, is getting in the way of the signal, preventing a full enjoyment of being here and expressing the experience of being here. That seems to me that's more interesting, more relevant, more useful than anything else I could talk about. Now, of course, that could be reductio ad absurdum, because I end up just talking about how I'm not talking about anything. I'm just noticing how my body is responding while I'm talking. I would end up with nothing at all to say, and then there would be nothing to observe. So, of course, I still have to come up with things to talk about. And I will, rest assured. But hopefully without forgetting to breathe. And breathe is a metaphor as well as a literal point here. One of the things I notice is tightness around the face and the mouth that's preventing, or see words already, it's not necessarily preventing, but it is the lack of a smile. Like I'm not feeling as light and as settled in my body, and I'm not enjoying being here as much as I could be. And one of the ways that I notice that is I'm not smiling, but I don't notice I'm not smiling because I don't smile that much anyway. So that wouldn't be very notable, but I can notice that I'm not even able to smile. Like, not that I want to try, but I can notice that there are micro muscles in my mouth that are the opposite of a smile. but they're very, very subtle. Of course, we have frowns and things like that, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something in the body that's experiencing a resistance to the life force. So actually, I do want to smile. I do want to express my enjoyment because it is there, but something in it is preventing it from bubbling forth in a situation that I've created for it to bubble forth, that I generally and genuinely enjoy. And so there's a constant moving away and towards, away from and towards that experience of bodily enjoyment. All right, so I mean, that may have been a lot of blah, 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 really about something really very, very simple. You know, how much am I in my body? But, you know, you say that that's simple, or I do, but it's really, apparently, to the mind, it's not simple at all, because many people, in my experience, don't even understand what that means. I've had somebody, I think it's a podcast, it was Zanor, I think it's on the podcast, it must have been, because it's the only time we talked, who just didn't get the idea of being disembodied. To him, it was a contradiction or meaningless, because, of course, we're in our body, where else could we be? Now, the simple answer is the mind. We can be in the mind. So then it's, where is the mind? And I asked this question to Dave yesterday in this podcast we did for Easter. I didn't get a straight answer, of course. But so I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that if I'm in my mind too much, I forget to be in my body, in the sense of I forget to breathe, I forget to relax, and so on. So there's something going on there that's dissociative, and that can be described as disembodied. And it seems to relate directly to anxiety, as in the more anxiety I have, the less settled I'm in the body, and vice versa. The less settled or focused or centered in my body, the more anxiety there is. And this seems to relate to speaking. Speaking generates self-consciousness, because when we speak, clearly we're speaking to or for someone, and therefore we're asking to be seen and heard. Therefore we become more acutely self-conscious via the act of speaking. The theory of mind is what feeds the mind sense of existing independently of the body. It's a theory. It's a theory that, if tested, can be, I think, can be disproved. But how do we test it? So that was a kind of improvised intro. Let me just check if... Okay, so the comments don't naturally catch up, so I'm just going to move over there, so I really can't see myself. This means I can't see how many people are, but that's kind of vanity too as well. It's just nice to keep an eye on the numbers. Somebody says howdy from Texas, and that's my sister. This for the last time in the end times. So, well, the first comment was about Aeon Bite, and that was my first note, so I'm going to start with Aeon Bite. Now, I did an interview, it was a last minute thing with Aeon Bite Miguel about the Matrix, on the anniversary of the Matrix. I agreed to do that because I have generally had a policy that I like to see as a kind of inverse vampire policy, which is I will go where I'm invited. It's not exactly the inverse vampire. Can't go anywhere unless he's invited. And I just say, if I'm invited, I'll go there. It was with Chris Knowles, who I hadn't spoken to in many, many years. And I didn't share it afterwards because I just didn't think it was that worth sharing. And after I watched it back, I wondered, and I asked my wife, was that worth doing? She thought it was, but I thought it probably wasn't. And I didn't feel like I really had been myself on it. And I think I know why, because like I was saying about YouTube or being in a shopping mall, the environment was too unfamiliar or unconducive to relaxation. And one of the things I felt that I did on that talk was I assumed a position about the Matrix that I would diss it as a movie. And I felt solid reasons for doing that, and I made them in the thing. I mean, there are reasons to criticize that movie. But on the other hand, I did love that movie, and I feel like I got a lot from it. It's just that well, as people know, I've reevaluated my past so thoroughly that I kind of feel that all of the things that I invested in or attached to were deceptive and somewhat delusional. But I also feel that they were grist for the mill and just part of the process, necessary part, even psychedelics. So then the question is why choose to emphasize the negative aspect? Maybe if I'd known that Chris Knowles was going to be so down on it, I might have, to be contrary, I might have chosen to take the other tack, but that's probably neither here nor there. The reason I thought it was particularly relevant now is that in my last blog post I wrote about how the focusing on the negative and the, let's say, chunking up, to use a term I've introduced recently via Dave Oshana, the chunking up from a kind of general data set of deception and manipulation within culture to a blanket rejection of culture, A, may be premature, and B, may be self-serving in some way, may not be simply a necessary positional perspective to take in order to protect oneself or to liberate oneself. It may also be an aspect of it that's self-serving. It may become itself a crucial fiction. And so this is where I'm at regarding the nature of the world. I want to open up. I want to allow for some chinks in the conceptual armor that I've created, just as somebody like Jan Irvin has created, and there are many listeners and followers. That's like this prophylactic that's supposedly there to allow us to have safe sex with the culture. Like, I can carry on watching Netflix because I know it's bad for me. So then I'll take the necessary precautions to not get SDT. But the flip side of that is that I will feel like a hypocrite, and maybe even be a hypocrite. I'll be using my paranoid awareness not as a way to more consciously navigate the shopping mall hell of society, but as an excuse to keep shopping there. I'm aware, man. I'm paranoid, so I can just carry on drinking the Kool-Aid. How nonsensical is that? This is Jonestown. We need to get out. So if I'm not willing to totally extricate myself from culture and the world, and I'm not able, and I'm even finding ways to be in the world that seem fruitful and nourishing, then why not soften my position about that without backpedaling? This is the art of the ninja. I don't have to backpedal because I don't think I ever went out on a limb and said culture is all bad, full stop. I might have said that, but there was always a comma and a but, like in Seen and Not Seen. It's all shit, but I'm writing a book to tell you that it's all shit, which means this book is shit. Well, okay, so how do we square that circle? There's a ray of light in that, potentially. I mean, either I'm an irredeemable hypocrite, or I'm trying to get to something that words aren't really getting me to, so I'm having to unveil or reveal the contradictory, hypocritical nature of words. It's not all shit, clearly, because out of shit comes flowers, and flowers aren't shit. The word shit is very different from the thing shit. Like, the word shit just means something bad. Well, it's good shit, man. Even there, we're confused, right? But basically, the way I'm using it now anyway, it just means something you do not want in your life. However, shit, the physical reality, is something that you cannot do without in your life. Not that you have a use for it, but I mean that there's no way to avoid having some kind of interaction with shit. I just had a shit this morning. It was a particularly good one, and it was particularly smelly, but it smelled particularly good. And I wondered about that, because I feel that my shits do stink much more than I would like them to, not just because they smell bad and it's embarrassing, even though I only live with one person, but because I figure, well, it probably means something about my health or my diet, and I don't want to have to reevaluate my diet because I like the food I eat. I am having to reevaluate it the last few days, because I think my body might be changing subtly, which is the thing that I have wished for and asked for, but I really don't want it, because I don't want to change my diet. If my body would just say no, 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 yes, in a real simple, like a computer script, then I would be okay with it. I would fight and resist, but at least it would be straightforward. But it isn't that straightforward. It's like, if I'm going to find out what my body really wants to eat, it's going to be a long process of trial and error, and it's going to be very onerous for my mind. So yeah, I don't want that. I didn't finish my point about the shit, but I'm not sure if it really needs finishing, just that it smelled good. And so I thought, well, so is that a healthy shit then? Does a healthy shit not smell at all, or does it smell good? And would I know? Would I really good enough to eat? Sorry, I really shouldn't be going this far, should I? But would I really be the right judge of that? Because I always like to smell my own farts. Everybody does. That doesn't mean that I ate something good, right? So it doesn't seem to follow that would apply with stool, but today I did wonder, because say usually it doesn't. I don't like to smell my own shit, but today I did. I even wanted to linger before I flushed. So anyway, and of course that was a digression, or an illustration of this point about it's all shit. Well, it's not all shit. It's just that there's so much shit, and it's been spread thin like butter, so far and wide, that it feels like everything is shitty. And maybe it is. Maybe we do need to carry around a hanky every time. I just watched Alan Partridge demonstrating how to use a toilet on the train without touching anything. It was very, very hilarious, and obviously very topical now. When we're moving through the world, yeah, we do want to practice hygiene, recognize that there probably is shit on most stuff, and we don't want to get shit on our hands. But that doesn't mean that everything is shit. It just means everything is a bit shitty, and that's not the same thing. We might be actually selling ourselves short in terms of we can handle a little bit of shittiness, and we need to, if we're going to sort the seeds and find what is of value, clearly. And even in a way, I mean, that has to even be in culture. What's the value in culture? It's funny, because I started out as a film critic, and that was what it was all about. And then I became a paranoid, full card carrying, and now I might, well, the better a film is, maybe the worse it is, because it's a delivery device for toxic culture. And I'm not reneging on that. I'm not backpedaling. But as I say about shit, shit is the result of the body's ability to separate the nutrition from the waste. So if we can do that bodily, we can do that psychically too. We can be entirely open to culture, as long as we know how to process it and to extract the nutrients. And there are nutrients in the culture, thank God. Otherwise we would all be dead and a lot more zombified than we are. I think the hypothetical they are trying to reduce over time steadily the nutrients within, of course, the food, literally speaking, but also the culture, figuratively speaking, so that there's less and less nutrients and more waste, and it's harder and harder for us to process it. So we use more and more energy. It's like if you use more energy digesting the food than the food gives you, you will die. And I think the human race probably is dying from indigestion in this continuation of the metaphor. Heartburn, which I had last night. So I guess I'm tuned into the collective in that regard. So so that's that. That's the Aeon Bite thing. One of the things that made me think I shouldn't have done Aeon Bite was that, just check my email, was that in the comments in the chat area, because I was talking about marijuana as an example similar to culture, that I knew not to do marijuana anymore because whatever kind of thrill or high it gave me didn't last, and I just at the end of it I was just with more toxins in my body. And I felt this way possibly about culture, and even the Matrix being the example on the table, that maybe it gave me lots of inspiration, but I couldn't really now separate, looking back, that inspiration from ego inflation. And it led to all kinds of behaviors that were kind of neurotic, inflamed neuroses. And I mean, literally, I was taking toxins and psychedelics inspired by the Matrix to be the one, and so on. But even figuratively, in terms of all the emotions, the chemicals that were getting triggered in my body by identifying with Neo during and after the movie, maybe that created more toxins in my body than all the inspiration empowered me or energized me to clear out, if you see what I mean. Back taxes, which is my view about psychedelics in general. Yes, they give you a big burst of energy, but most of it you lose. So then we're finite in energy, so you get a temporary or a brief experience of lots of energy, but you can't contain it, direct it, or ground it. So it just disperses out into infinity, and you're just, you've got that much less energy, life force to live your life thereafter, and then you have to replenish, restore, and heal the disrupted or frazzled cells, including or especially brain cells. So anyway, in the comment that stood out, I tried to sneak a peek at my hair there unconsciously, on the Aeon Bite chat thing on YouTube was, I do marijuana all the time, it's making my brain evolve. And psychedelics too, mushrooms. I mean, this belief now that these drugs, these chemicals, these substances are good, that they're good for us physically, even. I just thought, what am I doing talking to people like this? I mean, I don't mean people like this as in I'm condemning these people, but I mean somebody whose worldview is so far removed from mine that I can only see it as profoundly delusional, disconnected from all reality, rightly or wrongly. I got nothing to say to that person. But they might not agree. And so that could generate problems, because they might actually like some of the things I'm saying, and then I have reached an audience or reached an individual who I don't need to reach. I mean, it's not going to help either of us. It might help them, I suppose. I suppose it might help me. But, I mean, I don't have time. I don't have time to get past that kind of delusional perspective. That person's on a different, they're where I was 30 years ago, let's put it that way, although I never had illusions about marijuana to that extent. So yeah, so the larger thing is, well, why do something if it's going to attract the kind of reader or listener that really is not simpatico, was only going to end up offended? And if they were watching this, they would probably be offended. I would be, if I were them. And well, this kind of extends, I think, to the whole paranoid worldview as well. There seems to be a correlation between the people who are immersed in dark paranoid deconstructions of culture and the people who are actually addicted to dissociative fantasy, whether it's via movies like The Matrix or marijuana or psychedelics. There's a sort of symbiotic relationship there between, on the one hand, rejecting the culture, and on the other hand, wanting to stay immersed in it. And of course, the paranoid worldview, such as a movie like The Matrix, allows us to have our cake and eat it. We can feel that we're on the edge of the counterculture or the counterculture, while at the same time we're imbibing the products of the mainstream, like Alex Jones. Yeah. So, yeah, not what I'm about, or at least insofar as that is, that I do have those predilections, orientations myself, then I want to examine them and question them. And that all seems to be quite in tandem with shifting the audience, maybe by extension, the orientation away from the mind, where it is dark, to the body, where it is light, where lightning strikes. Oh, Floyd, I read your message, but you retracted it right after I read it. So I might be the only one who did. It was a sort of defense of drugs, but equivocal. And okay, so here's an example. I don't have to be hardline about this. Having seen the negative effects of all the drugs I've done, I feel qualified to talk about that, but not to the point of saying drugs are bad, you should never do them. Simply that it's not where I'm at, and I'm looking to connect to people who have also reached a point of being ready to move past that also. So yes, one can look back and say, well, there were some good points and bad points, but it's really, well, I'm going to put words in anyone else's mouth, but if somebody's still defending drugs unequivocally and saying they're a good thing and not recognizing the harm they do to the body, then sorry, that's just denial. They harm the body. I will stand my ground on that one, and I won't even go near the fence. In fact, I've burned the fence down on that one. All drugs harm the body, and that's inseparable from why they get us high. That doesn't mean they can't be used medicinally. because there's lots of medicines that harm the body, but they provide relief. There's even the possibility of, I suppose, but this is not very holistic, healing one aspect of our being at the cost of another. That's more like, I mean, we use the term self-medication, what really means self-anesthetizing. So I'm certainly not denying that drugs are medicinal in that sense. They definitely work as anesthetics. I don't think they could work to heal, but I might leave an unknown area there for consciously used power plants, by natives who are immersed in that culture and really know what they're doing, if there's any of them still around, which I would question even, but certainly that you or I are going to be able to find those true shamans who know what they're doing in today's Burning Man world is close to zero, I would say. We might be guided though, so then it might be close to 100% if we're guided. And that's the thing about culture as well. The thing is developing trust as the result of discernment. And discernment is a relentless skepticism that can be mistaken for cynicism, but it also can devolve into cynicism because we get so tired of being skeptical, while at the same time truly skeptical is open, staying open. It gets hard to stay open when every time everything you check out turns out to be dirty or flawed or false or counterfeit. Then the temptation to just start closing down and turn skepticism into cynicism is great. But then we've actually missed the boat. All of that developed discernment is for nothing, because the only reason to develop discernment is to trust. Because once we have a sufficient level of discernment, we can move through the world with trust that we will recognize the fakes, not with our minds, however. So, because if it was our minds, then that would be cynicism again. That wouldn't be trust. Can't ever trust with our minds, because the mind is configured to distrust. That's what it does. Suspicious Minds is a song that comes to mind. Only off drugs can you really discern reality. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because it's so obvious, but sobriety is necessary for consciousness to interact with reality directly. But there's so many ways to get around the obvious there. Oh, well, they're natural. They're part of nature. The earth gave them to us, and so on and so forth. But it's all self-contradictory, because the only reason to take psychedelics and drugs and marijuana is because they change our consciousness. That's the point of taking them. So the fact that they change our consciousness means that we're not experiencing the reality of the body as it is naturally configured. We're altering it. So yes, we might experience things, we do experience things we couldn't normally experience, but so what? That's the question. Why? How is it useful? And yes, at a certain point, it's back to the body without. And then, well, there's going to be a detoxification process that has to occur because of all the stuff we put in the body. No wonder people don't stop taking the damn things. Anyway, I didn't mean to talk about drugs so much. It's just that, I mean, that is a compelling subject. Maybe it's a sort of acid test or a litmus test in terms of how willing we are to be in the body as it is, as it feels. without mood alterance. Okay, well, I feel like I maybe perhaps want to say more about the trap of paranoid awareness, because I mean, it's certainly very central to it's like a bridge, really. And well, I'll bring up from the notes the recluse thing, because I think maybe it's an example. It might allow itself to become an example of what I'm not sure it is I want to say here. So I've been trying to do a podcast with Recluse of Babylon, who has a website, a blog that a lot of people value quite highly. I think he's a very thorough researcher of socio-political skullduggery. And been going on for months, actually, trying to get the podcast set up because of technical problems and this, that, and the other. So in the interim, I went on the retreat, and then I've been blogging about Dave O'Shana, so really changing my emphasis dramatically. And it looks like we've finally set up a thing for a couple of weeks from now to talk. But initially we were going back and forth about what to talk about, what data points to cover. And this time, when I heard from him this time, I said, well, yeah, I'm still willing to do it, but things have changed for me now, and I probably don't really want to talk about, don't want to just go over data points. But I'm open to talking about conspiratainment and conspiracy research and the different ways of approaching it, and paranoid awareness and the things I've been touching on today, you know, whether we need to chunk up all the way to global conspiracy or not, and if so, why, and other different ways, and so on. You know, the sort of more meta general thing, but also a more personal conversation with a fellow researcher. And he was down with that. But he said that he'd also come across some stuff recently that would be relevant to me, because it included people I'd written about: Roy Jenkins, David Owen, who gave Jimmy Savile the keys to Broadmoor, and there's a Fabian. Both those guys are Fabians. And Recluse had poo-pooed the Fabian thing in our email exchange. So I said, oh, well, you want to look at my book then, because it's definitely not smoke without fire, that one. And also the London School of Economics, also a Fabian organisation. So he'd found some data that corroborated my own stuff, apparently, and he said, you might be interested. And I said, well, yeah, actually, although I'm changing tack now, and I'm not going to be pursuing this stuff for now, that doesn't mean that if it comes knocking on my door, I'm not going to want to see it. Because, of course, I'm still interested. A leopard doesn't change his spots overnight. And even when a dog learns new tricks, he doesn't necessarily forget the old ones. So I feel as though, as I say about the bridge, is that, you know, there may have been a certain amount of genuine disorientation or destabilization for some people listening or reading when I changed tack so quickly, went from paranoid awareness to enlightenment now, so apparently quickly, even though, as I tried to point out, ever since I've started this, there's always been the thread of, this is not it, what I'm talking about here isn't it, it's what we have to get through to get to it, the thing that I can't talk about. It's always been there for the discerning. But anyway, it may have felt like you're going from 0 to 60 miles an hour to some people. And so The last blog post I wasn't consciously designed this way, but I could see as I was writing it, oh, this is going to serve this purpose, to help strengthen the bridge, because maybe it was a bit of a ropey bridge previously, and people say, there's no way I'm going to cross that thing, my God, and I can't even see the bottom of that chasm. You didn't even bother to build a sturdy bridge. Fuck you, Charlie. So yeah, to fortify the bridge that I built by re-including the paranoid aware perspective into the new focus and orientation, because it's still relevant, but it's also specifically relevant in terms of why I'm moving away from it, or coming through it, coming out the tunnel, how I'm coming out the end of the tunnel, and why it's necessary to do so. That the only point in being in the tunnel is to come out at the other end. It wasn't to read all the graffiti. But while we're in the tunnel, well, for a long period, we don't know we're in the tunnel. We just think we're in darkness. So, of course, we're looking for signs. But if we get stuck on the signs, I'm getting chills now because it's like I must be saying something that's true or meaningful. If we get stuck on the signs, then we'll stop moving forward and we'll forget that that we may be in a tunnel, or that we are trying to find the way out. Like, we start by looking to read the signs to find a way out, but the signs become so overwhelming and so compelling and so confusing and so hard to decipher that at a certain point, like crypto-crubology, we might end up just drowning in a sea of signs, and let the signs tell us what it is that we're trying to discover here. I don't know why I mentioned crypto-crubology, because he may be on the right track. I may be completely missing something there. But what it looks like from the outside is somebody who has got so overwhelmed by the signs that the signs have become everything. And although there's still the sense of this is meaningful, because of course we can't do something if we don't tell ourselves it's meaningful, the meaning that we've latched onto is being generated by the signs themselves. Now, this is very different than letting the evidence tell us what's happening. That's a solid research method. But if we're talking about a transcendent goal, which is how do we get out of this mess, then the evidence isn't going to tell us how to get out. It's only going to tell us how is the trap configured, and from there we can deduce more effectively which intuitions are correct and which are not correct, as in are not intuitions but are delusions, as far as how do we move forward, through and out. Where is the light at the end of the tunnel that we cannot see? How do we keep moving, referring to the evidence just to let us know that we're staying with the factual, but we're moving through it. We're moving through the evidence to make a picture coherent that's local, a local coherent picture, which we can then extrapolate to the world, but that's not really the point. That would be the way to stay in the tunnel, because the world is endless. We extrapolate out to the world because the research was world-based anyway, so we're constantly referring back and forth between the world, what we're mapping in the world, and our own lives. But the reference point that we can confirm only is our own lives. And as we confirm that, we confirm it in our bodies, because our bodies know. And as we place our awareness in our bodies, we start to see the light. We start to see the way out. And so the more and more our focus is on our bodies, the more we're confirming the organized malevolence and the nature of the trap we're in, the more we're seeing the way out of the trap. And so the less important, essentially, it becomes to have any reference point to that stuff. Paranoia becomes metanoia. And then it doesn't matter that the world is configured the way it is. It's not an issue, nor is it an issue to really understand mentally, or be able to to judge mentally between good and bad culture, because the body knows all this. And yesterday when I was talking to Dave Ashana, been on an hour, for the podcast, I said to him, I used to think that enlightenment was knowing everything. It was back when I wrote Homo sapiens. But now I think that enlightenment is not needing to know anything. And the reason, or the way that that might be true, is because the body has a way of knowing everything. So it's not either or, really. Enlightenment, in a certain sense, is knowing everything because it's knowing everything we need to know, but only because, or as we no longer need to know anything with our minds. And as we let go of the need to know stuff with our minds, then our awareness becomes less trapped in the mind, identified with and dependent on the mind, can settle more and more into the cells of the body where knowledge is. And so as awareness, we begin to access what we need to know, what to eat, where to walk, when to turn left, right, when to wash the hands, when to shit, how to love, how to talk without anxiety, how to run a thrift store and sort people's dirty underwear without vomiting, when to vomit, how to live the life force. And of course, if we know how to live, well, we don't need to know anything else, do we? And who doesn't know how to live? Well, everybody, but also nobody. Everybody knows how to live. It's alive. So if it didn't know how to live, it would be dead. Everybody knows how to live. But we've wanted to be a somebody, and so we've lost touch with being a body. How ironic, isn't it? To be a somebody requires uncoupling awareness from the body, putting it into a matrix avatar mind self that can be the one. And the insidiousness of the movie The Matrix is that, I would say, as great as a myth it is and all that stuff, it shows the truth metaphorically in such a way that it inverts it, because it's more fun. I mean, the whole point of getting free in the Matrix isn't to be free. It's so that you can go back into the illusion and be a superhero. So how is that freedom? If reality is less fun than the illusion, how is that freedom? It's ironic, isn't it? Because Cypher, he took the blue pill so he could escape the Nebuchadnezzar, and he wanted to be a celebrity. But the main thing was that he forget. Whereas Neo, because he remembered the truth while in the Matrix, he got to be the one. He got a much better trip than Cypher ever could. He really got to have his cake and eat it. But I just wonder, why he would even want to unplug from the Matrix once he got to be the one in the Matrix. Because once he's out of the Matrix, he's not the one anymore, is he? He's just another guy eating gruel on a rusty old ship surrounded by malevolent machines. No fun. No fun, to quote the leading punk band of my childhood, of British history. I feel like playing the song now. If it was a radio, I would. But that does conveniently bring me back to the last bullet point, why no one wants to wake up. Why do we not want to wake up? Why are we not awake? Because we don't want to wake up. And because our idea about waking up, and the reason we think we want to, is because we have an idea about it that is mind-based. But that's also why we don't wake up. We think that we're going to wake up in our mind. We're going to free our minds. We don't think of it in terms of getting free from the mind and into the body, going all the way into the body. That's what waking up is. The body wakes up. And when the body wakes up, there's going to be an awful lot of distress. Although, apparently that wasn't the way it was for Devashana, so I don't know. But who knows what he went through beforehand. And anyway, I can't really... It's a bit of a annoyance, because I can't refer to Devashana's experience because I'm not Dave, so I don't know what it was. I've only got his word for it, and words are cheap. But I can't refer to my own experience because I haven't experienced enlightenment. So I've got to bring the two together and like create a vesica piscis between what I can intuit and tune into with Dave, who may be enlightened, and what I know for myself bodily. And what I end up with is, I don't want to be awake. Much as my mind does, my conscious mind, much deeper levels, I don't want to, because I'm comfortable. I'm very, very comfortable being asleep, thank you very much. And it's going to be uncomfortable to be awake. It's going to require, well, leaving the dream behind, feeling what state my body's in, never feels good in the morning, finding the impetus and the energy to want to get up, and then getting up, showering, shitting, washing teeth, making a smoothie, on a cosmic scale, man. Now, those things are pretty easy for me, relatively, because I've done them every morning for the last however many years. They're a routine. But we're talking about something that, well, we don't even know what we're talking about, do we? That's the thing. All we know is that based on the metaphor and the model of being asleep, it's really nice being asleep. It really is nice. It's the comfiest, coziest time of our lives. And waking up, well, it can happen naturally in its own time, and it's not so bad, but it can also be very rude, very unpleasant, very premature, even borderline traumatic. And if we're looking for awakening, we're asking for the second kind, because if we were just interested in the first kind, as in a natural, in its own time awakening, well, we wouldn't be looking for it. We'd just carry on sleeping and say it's fine being asleep. We'd just enjoy it. But I can't enjoy being asleep because it's an endless identity crisis. Because I know I'm asleep. So it's like I'm caught in an unpleasant dream, kind of dimly aware of my body, but I can't get back to it. That's what it's like. That's kind of nightmarish. So I'm trying to wake myself up, but something else is stronger that's keeping me asleep. That's why I feel I need an intervention. I've had experiences like this where I was in such a nightmare realm of body affect memory that in the dream I was screaming, hoping that I'd wake my wife up. Because if I woke my wife up, I suppose she would wake me up. Maybe that's what we're all doing in our different ways, screaming in the dream in the hope that we'll wake each other up so that one of us wakes up can start waking the rest of us up. And maybe that's what Dave is doing, not the screaming. Maybe he's wandering around, still in a bit of a daze, hearing all these people screaming, trying to wake him up, and getting mistaken for a guru, or whatever the fuck else. And also for an unwelcome intrusion. I mean, not mistaken there, getting seen as, oh, don't bother me. Oh, leave me alone. Nobody likes being woken up. I mean, have you ever tried it? You ever try waking somebody up? Even if they ask you, you don't want to do it. You know that they're not going to appreciate it. I wake my wife up all the time when she's snoring, but I've learned the art. I think she might disagree. There's many things she might go on record one day about, say, all the stuff I got wrong whenever I mention her. But I think I've learned the art of waking her up without waking her up enough that she stays awake. So she's not really aware of me waking up, but this is when she's snoring. So I'm just like, it's kind of a way. And part of it, what it is pretending. It's not really pretending, but it's neutralizing the part of me that, it's like I'm pretending myself to be asleep and I'm just turning over. So I don't go wake up. I just go and sort of put my arm around her, as if I'm half asleep. So my body's communicating. It's kind of similar energy to what her body's in, so it doesn't disrupt too much, but it sends the signal to the body to roll over. That's all I want. I don't need to wake her up, just need her to roll over. So it's not an exact metaphor, because Dave doesn't need us to wake up. I don't know about need, but I need us to wake up. We all need us to wake up. So we're not just trying to get each other to roll over, of course. So we're not disturbing each other's slumber. But I think the other part of the metaphor might be quite useful in that if we're going to help each other wake up, we do want to match each other's rhythms. So it's not too rude, it's not too disruptive, it's not too shocking. (12:12 p.m. Check my email. Okay, so no more emails about a Zoom meet. And have there been any questions? So she said not cozy and comfortable in nightmare sleep. No, that's right. But physically we're still. Like, even waking up from a nightmare, yeah, we'll be relieved about getting out of the nightmare, but we're still in a cozy, comfy space physically. So we might still not like being woken up from a nightmare, if you know what I mean. We might still just want to go back to sleep. So even in a nightmare, there are reasons to stay asleep. It's true that there are less, and the greater the nightmare, the more incentive there is to wake up, which is where I think the dark night of the soul thing comes from or relates to, and why I've always believed that there must be a dark night of the soul before a full awakening, until I met Dave and he says no, didn't happen for him. But then he was meditating at 5, so maybe he was doing an awful lot of processing of his unconscious before he even had much unconscious, and that would make a huge difference, because I would say that the dark night of the soul and nightmares do relate to unconscious, unprocessed unconscious matter, and that the less we process that, the ruder the awakening, the more terrifying it is to become awake. So the way to avoid a dark night of the soul that was a single night would be to have a whole bunch of twilight nights of the soul over decades. And I've certainly had my share of those. And I do feel that on a good day, which is today now because I've been enjoying this, is on a good day I do feel that my awareness is moving cell by cell into the body, or awareness, and that I may just pop one day, awaken, and that it won't be intolerably rude and unpleasant. I mean, it feels possible at least. I no longer feel invested in the idea of I've got to go through the dark night of the soul and face the demons one by one. Because we can get comfortable in a nightmare too. That's kind of the worst case scenario, because then what have we got left to awaken us? So we have the idea of a dark night of the soul, or a paranoid conspiracy world that we're locked in, trapped inside, and that becomes the familiar narrative, the crucial fiction. We're really fucked then. Because the very thing that exists in a divine sense or an existential sense to wake us up has become our comfort zone. It's no longer nightmarish, it's dreamlike, or it's no longer sufficiently nightmarish to wake us up. We've found a way to adapt to it, so we've become of the world, even in our attempts to get free of the world. Because not being in the world, being in the world but not of the world, becoming not of the world isn't about trying to escape from the world. It's the opposite. It's about coming all the way into the body, and the body is nested in the world, society, culture, human beings, nature. I guess like that, really. Those are the levels of matrices. And eventually they're benign. Nature is not entirely benign, pretty ruthless, but nature is nested in eternity, which is benign through and through. So, and all of that eternity bleeds through all the layers, through nature, into the human beings who are nature, into culture and into society. It's all us, and it's all eternity. It's all benign. But if we stay focused and fixated on the nightmare of history, and our only way to deal with it is just to adapt to it and become more like it, and part of that is that we're going to fight it and resist it and reject it, because that's what the world is like, the scapegoat mechanism, then we're trapped. And that's the mind's defense, to create a heaven out of hell, and thereby create a hell out of heaven. Well, that was a very poetic point to end on. I feel that the transmission saw us through today to a very tidy resolution. I won't know for sure until I watch back, but maybe it was a good idea not to look at myself today. Maybe that helped. I'll take questions now. Can this waking up be visible in any other system, or how does one determine being awake beyond a subjective knowing that can't be translated? Yes, just that. I mean, we may have dreams. We don't know if, I mean, I have nightmares actually. Am I awake? Am I dreaming now? Because I think this is real, but it feels so unreal. They're very horrific. Like I feel trapped in unreality, but I don't know it's a dream. And then I might have obviously a dream where I know I'm sleeping. So that's closer to reality. But when you wake, you know you're awake. You know you're awake. Of course you do. You wake up, there you are. I mean, part of that is the familiarity, of course. You recognize. If you woke up somewhere completely different, it would be very confusing, and you probably would go through a process of, oh my God, am I dreaming this? But you'd still know the quality of your awareness. You might have to accept that somehow you're teleported or woken up in a different reality, and that would skew everything you think you know about reality. And yes, of course, we do live in some sort of Philip K. Dick reality in which, mentally speaking, we don't have a point of reference for what's real. But bodily, we know the difference between being awake and asleep. Is it akin to somatic healing, which bypasses the mind in order to deal with trauma? It may very well be. Somatic. What was one of the things I suggested that Dave used instead of enlightenment? Somatic ensoulment. Soul retrieval, somatic healing, embodiment. I mean, it's a problem, again, of words. If there's a soul, and the soul is what we are, then when the soul lands in the body, the soul knows it's landed in the body. If there's a mind and it's what we're not, the mind, well, will have to concur. But in the meantime, the mind can conflate or confabulate all kinds of illusory counterfeits to that and say, this is my soul and this is my higher self. So yeah, of course, it's confusing to the mind because there are a million different ways to think that you're enlightened when you're not. But there's only one way to be enlightened and know it. And by definition, we're going to know it. So as long as you're doubting, I guess it's not it. But even if you're not doubting, it might not be it. But when it's it, there'll be no doubt. So yeah, this is mind, isn't it? Just mind stuff. If we're referring to our mind to know, well, then we can know that it hasn't happened. I think that's quite a good soundbite, actually. The only problem is of course, people don't necessarily realize they're referring to their mind. They really don't. We really don't. We've got so accustomed to think of mind as who we are that we'll conflate intuition and vision and all kinds of things with mind stuff. That's Prisoner of Infinity for you. Okay. So I hope that this has been fun. It was 1:22:22. And I hope that it's been fun enough that people will sign up for the Zoom version next time. I guess not this time, because there's only one person, Martin, who I can talk to, not any time, but perhaps on another occasion, just the two of us, unless I get a bunch of emails after this. Like I'll check for the next 15 minutes or so. But yes, next week, if it happens anywhere, let's make it happen on Zoom. And if there isn't enough interest in Zoom, I'll set up something on the radio and I'll see if I can do call-ins or something, and we'll make this old-fashioned radio and get away from this YouTube hell that's been created to lure us in and buy nasty, unnecessary products of mind endlessly. Okay, so I think that's all. I think I'm going to go now. I can't put, I mean, I can put music on the end. Maybe I should. I don't know why I said I can't. This is on random shuffle, so that's kind of fun, because we'll just find out what song it is. Okay, this is me, one more time. Thanks everyone for showing up, and I hope to actually see you next time on Zoom. Send me an email, Jason, with a U at protonmail.com.
I stayed too long, again I'm afraid. I made you miss your plane to make this scene. Which body of water is this here? I didn't know you were going anywhere. Are you trying to get away from me? I can tell by the pause in your voice and face that you've never met me before. I have to admit that I'm not sure how I ended up anywhere near you. Are you trying to get away from me? Are you trying to get away from me? It's all part of the means to an end of me. Remind you of me. It's all part of the means to an end of me. Remind you of me.